In the grand, furious hunt to bring down America's most infamous gangster, the federal government threw everything it had. They deployed squads of their best agents, men trained in surveillance, intimidation, and forensic accounting, all chasing the ghost of Al Capone. They followed the blood trails. They tracked the whiskey trucks. They listened to every whisper of murder and extortion. And every single time, Capone slipped away, protected by a wall of fear, corruption, and perfect deniability. The mission was clear: build a criminal case that would stick. So the Treasury Department sent not one, not five, but 30 of its sharpest minds into the labyrinth of Capone's empire. They were looking for a smoking gun. What they found was something far more mundane and infinitely more deadly. 30 men went hunting for a monster. Only one found the key to his cage. And that key wasn't in a ledger of murders or a warehouse of illegal booze. It was in a single, boring, bureaucratic document. To understand the sheer, maddening brilliance of this failure-turned-victory, you have to understand a man who made it necessary. By 1930, Alphonse Gabriel Capone wasn't just a gangster. He was a corrosive American myth. He ruled Chicago not from the shadows, but from a presidential suite at the Lexington Hotel, holding court with politicians, businessmen, and reporters. He had publicly ordered the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, eliminating an entire rival gang with the cold efficiency of a general. And yet, he had an alibi crafted from solid gold. He was untouchable because he understood the system better than the system understood itself. He controlled the police, he controlled the courts, and he made sure that any crime he was connected to was committed by layers and layers of proxies. The violence was a tool, but the real empire was built on beer, brothels, and gambling, a river of cash so vast it was impossible to fully trace. Or so he thought. The federal government, personified by a stern, incorruptible lawyer named Eliot Ness and his Untouchables, had been waging a very public war on Capone's bootlegging operations, spectacularly smashing barrels and grabbing headlines. But every arrest was a minor inconvenience. The real, quiet war was being waged by a different branch entirely, the intelligence unit of the Bureau of Internal Revenue. Their leader was a methodical, relentless man named Elmer Irie. Irie knew trying to convict Capone for murder was a fool's errand. But he had a different theory. Follow the money. Capone was flamboyantly wealthy, living a life of staggering excess, yet he had never filed a single income tax return. He claimed he had no taxable income. Irie's strategy was simple: prove that lie. And so, the great financial siege began. 30 agents, accountants, and investigators descended on every facet of Capone's life. This was a conflict, not a war of bullets, but a war of paperwork. It was a grueling, tedious, and monumentally frustrating process. They subpoenaed bank records, but the accounts were under fake names. They tracked wire transfers that vanished into shell companies. They interviewed bookmakers and casino owners who suddenly developed amnesia. Capone's financial labyrinth was a masterpiece of obfuscation. The agents on the ground, the ones kicking down doors with Ness, felt they were getting closer, but legally they were stuck in a maze. For 2 long years, the case inched forward, a mountain of circumstantial evidence with no definitive pillar. The public was growing impatient. Capone mocked the efforts in the press. It seemed the great Al Capone would once again walk away, not with a bang, but with a smug grin, until one agent, working to lead everyone else had considered a dead end, made a connection no one else had seen. While others looked at the macro, the millions flowing in and out, this agent was looking at the micro, at the mundane artifacts of a life. He wasn't just looking for evidence of income. He was looking for evidence of a specific transaction. His breakthrough came not from a vault in Chicago, but from a filing cabinet in a Philadelphia hotel. Years earlier, in a moment of uncharacteristic carelessness during a different legal scrape, Capone had volunteered financial information. The agent, piecing together travel itineraries and old subpoenas, found a record of a wire transfer Capone had made to pay for a gambling debt. It was a single thread in a vast tapestry, but it was a thread that was definitively, legally connected Capone himself. More crucially, it led the agent to a ledger kept by one of Capone's own bookkeepers, who had been arrested on an unrelated charge. This ledger, written in simple, clear code, didn't detail murders or bootlegging runs. It detailed profits. Specifically, It detailed the profits from Capone's illegal gambling operations, and crucially, it connected those profits directly to Capone's personal spending. This was the proof, not of racketeering or murder, but of a simple, prosecutable federal crime: tax evasion. The consequences were immediate and irreversible. The entire case pivoted. Eliot Ness's dramatic raids had set the stage, but this single, boring piece of financial evidence was a trapdoor that swung open beneath Capone's feet. In October 1931, Al Capone, the king of Chicago, the orchestrator of massacres, the symbol of lawless prosperity, was convicted not for the violence that made him famous, but for failing to pay taxes on the money he made from that violence. The sentence was 11 years in federal prison, a staggering blow. He was sent to Alcatraz, where his health deteriorated, his power evaporated, and his myth was punctured. He was released a broken man, dying a few years later from complications of syphilis, a pathetic end for a once terrifying figure. For law enforcement, it was a paradigm shift. The Capone case taught the government a powerful and enduring lesson. To destroy a complex, protected criminal empire, you don't always need to fight them on their own brutal turf. You find the one rule they think is beneath them, the one bureaucratic line they fail to cross, and you use that to build an inescapable cage. The IRS gained a fearsome new reputation as the agency that could get anyone. The legacy of that one agent, whose name is often lost to history, is a lesson in the power of patience, perspective, and the mundane. It proves that the downfall of giants often hinges not on a heroic battle, but on a single, overlooked detail. Capone's empire was designed to withstand an army. It was designed to withstand shotguns and subpoenas for murder. But it was not designed to withstand a meticulous accountant with a subpoena for a hotel receipt. The story teaches us that in a world obsessed with dramatic confrontations, true power often lies in mastering the boring, the administrative, the fine print. Capone understood fear, violence, and corruption. He never understood the quiet, relentless power of a balanced ledger. The 30 agents went looking for a crime king. One of them found him by following a paper trail. And in doing so, he wrote the modern playbook for bringing down the untouchable. The most feared man in America wasn't brought down by a gun, but by a receipt. The receipt in question, a mundane slip of paper for a telegraphic money transfer, became the single thread that, once pulled, unraveled the entire tapestry of Capone's invincibility. But the true profundity of this event lies not in the document itself, but in the colossal shift in thinking it represented. For centuries, society had understood power as a pyramid. At the top, the kingpin, the warlord, the man of violence who was enforced through terror. Capone was the apex of that ancient model, a feudal lord in a modern city. The federal government's initial approach was to attack that pyramid head-on, with Eliot Ness as a charismatic knight charging the castle gates. It was dramatic, cinematic, and ultimately feudal against a structure built to absorb such blunt force. The one agent who found the proof, however, didn't attack the pyramid. He ignored its imposing silhouette and began meticulously mapping its plumbing, its electrical wiring, its sewer lines. He understood that a modern empire, even a criminal one, doesn't run on loyalty and fear alone. It runs on cash flow, communication, and logistics. The telegraph receipt was a fossilized imprint of that system, a tiny, irrefutable signal in the noise of illegal commerce. It proved Capone wasn't a mythic figure operating outside the economy. He was a businessman within it, subject to its most boring and universal rule: you must account for your money. This was the birth of the white-collar takedown. The consequences rippled far beyond a single conviction. The case institutionalized a new form of warfare. The FBI, under J. Hoover, learned that flashy arrests were for show, but real power came from financial intelligence. The IRS's intelligence unit became the most feared weapon in the federal arsenal, a lesson applied decades later to mob bosses like Meyer Lansky, who nonetheless outmaneuvered it, and, eventually, to drug cartels and modern oligarchs. Capone's tax conviction created a legal precedent that turned every dollar earned, legally or illegally, into a potential snitch. It meant that from that moment forward, any criminal who enjoyed the fruits of his labor, a fancy car, a nice suit, a steak dinner, was creating a taxable event that could be used to imprison him. The most profound consequence, however, was psychological. It demystified the gangster. Al Capone imprisoned stripes, not for being a murderer, but for being a tax cheat, was a far more potent symbol than Al Capone dead in a gutter. It showed that the system, however slow and plodding, could win through procedure. It transformed the gangster from a romantic, rebellious anti-hero into a pathetic figure who was, at his core, just a bad accountant. His legacy is this stark duality. We remember the myth of Scarface, the brutal king of Chicago, but the historical truth is Al Capone, federal prisoner number 40886. The lesson is one of asymmetric strategy. Don't fight your enemy where he is strong. Fight him where he is complacent, where he feels safe, where he considers himself above the rules. Capone's strength was his orchestration of chaos and violence. His fatal weakness was his contempt for bureaucracy, his belief that the small print was for small men, the agent who found the proof weaponized that contempt. The legacy of that one piece of paper is everywhere today. In anti-money laundering laws, in the forensic accounting that unravels corruption scandals, in the notion that the paper trail is mightier than the bullet trail. It cemented the idea that in the modern world, the most dangerous weapon isn't always a pistol. It's a subpoena for financial records. The story of the 30 agents is a parable for persistence and perspective. 29 men looked at the mountain of Al Capone and tried to find a crack to dynamite. One man looked at the same mountain and simply started counting the grains of sand at its base, knowing that even a mountain is just an accumulation of tiny, accountable parts. He found the one grain that didn't belong, the receipt, and by removing it, he initiated the avalanche that buried a king. The final, unspoken message of the case is this. You can armor yourself against armies, you can buy silence, you can terrify a city, but you cannot hide from the arithmetic of your own life. Every empire, no matter how darkly glamorous, is built on a foundation of receipts. And in the end, it's always the math that gets you.